Hi, I'm Harry Jarin. I'm running for Congress in Maryland's 5th Congressional District. I'm here today with Ryan Daniels, who's running for St. Mary's County, Maryland, Commissioner District 4. Ryan's a Maryland native. He's a combat veteran who's dedicated his life to service. He enlisted in the Marine Corps. He fought in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was wounded in action, earning the Purple Heart. And after leaving the military as a staff sergeant, he's continued serving through nonprofit work, helping other veterans get the VA benefits that they're promised. And more recently, he spent a lot of time on the ground in Ukraine during the war. He's seen what the fight for democracy looks like firsthand, and I'm glad to be talking with him today. Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thank you, Harry. And like I said, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about Ukraine and bring some awareness to the conflict going on over here. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's funny. I've been doing a lot of interviews this past week, but I'll be asking the questions a little bit more today. I've been involved in a lot of aid efforts over there. I've been over there a couple times as well. But keeping in mind OPSEC, can you describe where you are right now in Ukraine and what your day-to-day work has been like?
Yeah. So currently, I am back in Kharkiv Oblast, specifically in the city of Kharkiv, which is the second biggest city in Ukraine. It's about 20 kilometers from the Russian border. So you can imagine there's a lot going on here. My work here was supposed to be different this time as well, but when I got here a couple of days ago, it's already changed a little bit. So mostly what it is just trying to fill in some of the gaps of the things that we were not able to complete last time. Because if you recall me talking to you before, the work that I was supposed to do last time changed significantly by the time I got here and by the time I left, because of USA being cut and some political issues going on between the United States and other countries. So right now I'm just trying to complete some work there, close some stuff out, and help them in any way possible. Like tomorrow, they're trying to do a couple more things to get some like US awareness. So they're trying to expand their reach as far as the Red Cross goes, specifically the Red Cross. And I'm going to help them translate and talk to a couple different entities to try to continue their aid cycle that they have to do the things that the Red Cross does here, the humanitarian work, the aid delivery, the evacuations, the rapid response team, and all those other things. So it's a lot of different things that they do. It's always a crapshoot depending on what happens. Like today, nothing super bad happened today, but it was like we had 2 shellings today. They were relatively light. As far as I know, no one got injured. But stuff like that. It's a lot here on the ground, especially this close to Russia.
What does aid look like in practice? I think a lot of Americans have a lot of misconceptions about what aid is. We imagine it as we send like a big pallet of cash over, and that's not exactly the case. And a lot of countries, including the U.S., have sent a lot of weapons, certainly, and some of the aid efforts that I've been involved with. There's a guy in Illinois that I've helped out who sends fire apparatus and ambulances, vehicles, things like that. But what are you seeing on the ground as far as what aid actually looks like, and where are the gaps right now?
So I've seen, it depends on which entity I'm supporting at the time. Like I said, the entities have changed. Typically, if I am doing some frontline work, it will be weapons, ammo, stuff specifically for the soldiers. If it's for humanitarian wise, the big one is UNICEF and USAID. Back in the day, I haven't done any yet since I've been here this time, but that was typically just like you said, pallets of water, pallets of hygiene gear, pallets of first aid gear, and a lot of pallets of food. It's typically a lot of food, like boxes and boxes of food. I have not seen any cash changing hands in any way in that spectrum. And I've worked with the mayor in Kharkiv, the mayor in Chuhuiv, the mayor in Poltava, the mayor in Kupiansk has evacuated here to Kharkiv. I've done some work with them. I haven't seen any money in that aspect like some Americans have heard on the news. None of that I'm aware of. And I'm certain that by now that if that was taking place, the entities that I work with or have worked with, I probably would have seen it by now. And I do not see that. So
yeah, I feel like at this point, Ukraine has a much stronger anti-corruption regime than the United States. That all the corruption that we've seen in the United States at the federal level in the past year, I don't think anything going on in Ukraine holds a candle to that. They've actually had a ton of development in the field of civil service and upending some of the maybe pre-independent Ukraine Soviet culture of corruption. I've heard a lot of that from Ukrainians over the past couple of years, that they've done a really good job of putting some of these safeguards in place that frankly we just don't have in the same way in the United States. I wanted to ask what does it, with everything going on right now between the Trump administration and the Russian government and the Ukrainian government, what does it mean to Ukrainians that they see Americans like you on the ground, present and helping out?
So specifically this time, there is a lot of concern about continued care of the Ukrainian people, because the truth of the matter is Ukraine right now is fighting against an authoritarian regime. Like they're literally fighting against them, doing exactly what the U.S. did. The reason we were found in the first place, fighting an authoritarian regime. So when they've heard some of the things that are going on in the U.S., they're just concerned, like, do they still have our back? Are they going to continue to support us? Are they going to kind of sell us out to Russia? When I was here the first time, it was very pro-U.S. And this time, it's less pro-U.S. and more wariness about saying too much, because it doesn't seem like anyone wants to add insults. No one wants to add too much praise. There's a lot of uncertainty because, as you and I both know, after being in Ukraine and doing what we've done and following, there's a lot of concerning news about the future of Ukraine in regards to the U.S. trying to put in place certain things that Ukrainians, none of them want. No one wants to give up the eastern provinces and the southern provinces. No one wants that. Everyone is very pro-Ukraine, does not want to give up land. And it seems like, at least on our end from the United States, if Ukrainians don't do that, then, U.S. isn't going to help them. So I know that's a concern, but at the same time, I think they're just doing their best every day to not think too much about politics and just do the work on the ground, because there's a lot of work here on the ground just to do every day. So I think that just kind of helps take some of the focus off that.
Yeah. What motivated you to get involved? So my grandparents are from that part of the world. My family, they were Jews from what's now the western part of Ukraine. I definitely feel a strong affinity with that part of the world. And just through my own study of history, I understand how Ukraine has been very much a flashpoint in a lot of the conflicts of the 20th century and now into the 21st century. What motivated you to get involved?
So there's a number of things, but really what it came down to is about a year and a half ago, I got offered an opportunity to come over here. The work changed a lot. The situation changed a lot. I ended up doing a lot more than I thought I was going to do. I ended up working with a lot more entities than I thought. I ended up putting myself in a lot more danger than I thought. But at the point of it was, when I was, when I looked into this and wanted to do something, I had been traveling a lot over the last years. And don't get me wrong, the travel was great, but it got to the point where it just felt a little selfish. And I wanted to do something to give it, to give something back. So I looked into going to Gaza, and the State Department told me no. I was going to go to Syria with a travel group that did work with kids. Obviously, that was right around the time all that other stuff in Syria was going on, which that's a whole nother topic, because, as you know, that's a mess right now. And then I knew some people that had been here in Ukraine. They had been injured, and they had put me in some contact with some people anyway. So I was like, well, there's my opportunity to go give something back. I just felt guilty being at home, not really doing anything for anyone else, only doing something for myself. And honestly, at this point, it's been a year and a half since that opportunity was had, and I've been here already. I'm here again. It just kind of seems what I'm kind of meant to do in a way. Obviously, I want to run for office at home because I want to bring some of the, you know, the way that I do things, the vision, experience I have, outside of myself. I want to bring that home. But this kind of work, it scares me how good I am at it, but I'm very good at it, and I knew I could offer it, and it's really worked out. But that's really why I just wanted to do something good for people, because if I can't, I wish I could understand myself better, but I help myself helping other people. That's really what it is. I enjoy helping other people. It just gives me purpose.
I can very much relate with that.
I assume because you've been to Ukraine too, so you see how wonderful the people are here and how much they
yeah,
need and how much it means to them when you do something for them.
the feeling that I could be out doing something to help and I'm not, and that guilt, and I know exactly what you mean. Hey, I could really make a difference here. I can't just sit at home when that's a possibility. I 100% get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I want to move the conversation a little bit. Let's zoom out into the bigger picture. We've been hearing for years and years now about Russia's imperial logic with regards to Ukraine. Russia justifies its invasion of Ukraine going back to the invasion of Crimea in 2014, using the language of history, the language of grievance politics, that Russia was wrong. This is very much what Vladimir Putin and a lot of his top brass talk about in a historical context, that Ukraine was historically Russian, and that it was a great crime of the 20th century that the Soviet Union and their empire collapsed, and that they're trying to restore what they already had. It's very much a make Russia great again kind of narrative, and this of course feels very familiar to me. Not all American audiences may make the connection between Russia's imperial logic and what the United States is doing right now. But I wanted to bring that up, especially in the context of the United States making threats against Denmark and Greenland. That I see a very direct parallel here. That not that Greenland has ever been United States territory, but it's very much the same imperial logic that we're going to make our country great again through territorial expansion. That, oh, well, to ensure our security, we need this very large landmass that's sort of next to us. And in that sense, it sounds and feels very much like what Russia was doing in advance of the invasion of Crimea and in advance of the full-scale invasion in 2022. So I was wondering if you could talk about some of the parallels that you've seen between what Donald Trump is talking about, and that sort of imperial logic, and the way Russians talk about Ukraine.
Yeah. Oh man, because that's most of this has happened since I've been over there, and I'm only able to follow it maybe a couple hours a day when I'm actually at my place and I have Wi-Fi and power. But if the idea of something like us taking over Denmark, the way that I have heard people in the U.S. talk about, specifically Donald Trump, it's an atrocity, because it's not like, it would be one thing, I guess maybe it would be one thing if we ever owned it, like you said, but we never have. And the idea is to them that we want, Greenland, which is part of Denmark, because it makes the world, it'll make the world more safe. It will make the U.S. more safe. It will add to, X, Y, and Z. But the truth of the matter is we already have forces stationed in Greenland. Plenty of forces. We operate freely going out of Greenland. We've had that agreement for a long time now. So
yeah, 75 years, and we've had that base up there since 1951. This is not. We're not breaking new ground here.
Yeah. So to me, what does it all kind of go back to? It's less about security. It's probably more about precious metals. That's what it seems like to me.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely onto something. So much of this comes back to corruption and Trump's own business interests. And a lot of what he does may not make sense logically, but when you put it in the lens of how does this improve his relationship with Russia and how does this benefit his personal business interests, then all of a sudden a lot of this stuff makes sense. And to your point about making the world a safer place, taking over Greenland would make the world a significantly less safe place, because it would just about break up the NATO alliance. And ultimately, that is a huge goal of the Russian government. And that's one reason they've been pushing the idea of Greenland to Trump for a very long time. The whole thing really got started as a psyop. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but this is absolutely true. In 2019, Russia forged a letter from the from Greenland's foreign minister. They sent it to Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, who then shared it with Trump. And that was really the seed of this idea. That's how they planted this concept in Trump's mind that they were going to take over Greenland. And also, it just looks really big on a Mercator projection map. And I don't think he realizes it's not actually that big. And
yeah, and I'm glad there's actually awareness on that map the last year or so,
yeah,
understanding how that map is kind of not truly sized correctly, because
right.
seeing a lot
Greenland's
of that,
not
I've known
actually
that for
larger than
years.
South America, right?
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, it, like the metals things kind of make sense to me because it kind of goes back to the deal in Ukraine. It always goes back to Ukraine too, because a big portion of what Russia has is precious metals, rare earth metals. They're all there. So there's a part of that, the deal we were trying to do that too. So I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm not trying to bash. I'm not trying to be too political here. This is mostly about Ukraine and about the safety of the United States. Because even when it comes to the Greenland issue, it's a lot less about world politics to me. I think of my country I love, the country I almost died for, the country I'm fighting democracy for, including over here to keep this from ever going over there. If we invade Greenland, it makes US safe or less safe because for A, the reason that you said already, but B, if we think that NATO is going to let that happen and let us keep our bases in Germany and Italy and Norway, this global expansion we've had that with our allies that have allowed us to base our troops over there, which has been really great for us, that collapses. It makes us significantly weaker. Regardless of party politics, I don't want that for my country because that will make us less safe. So outside of the Trump and everything else, I don't want that for my country because it's just a bad deal for us, all of us, regardless of political affiliation.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Americans don't understand how integral our allies in Europe are to our logistics, our ability to operate and project power into the Middle East. There's not a great understanding, and maybe you, as a former soldier, you have a better understanding of why those bases matter and why our alliances matter. It's something the Trump administration is not talking about. They speak about Russia like they're this great friend of ours, trying to suck up to them, and they love to trash our actual European allies. It's really, really disgusting. And I think it's worth mentioning that Denmark contributed troops to the NATO mission in Afghanistan. They lost 43 soldiers killed in action. I think per capita, they had one of the highest casualty rates because it's such a small country. So, these allies have literally fought and bled alongside us, including Ukraine, I might add. They also contributed soldiers to some of our adventures.
They did. And when I was in Afghanistan, we had Georgian and Ukrainian soldiers on Leatherneck.
Wow.
I remember meeting them because they didn't understand English. They were in the bus, and I was like, "Who's these guys?" And that's what they were.
Wow. I mean, it's really not that long ago.
It's not. So that was 2000. That was Afghanistan. That was 2010.
Wow. It's incredible how much has changed since then. How do you respond to Americans that say, "Oh, that's not our problem"? America first, ignoring the fact that Greenland is not America, or that Venezuela is not America, or that Iran is not America either. But how do you respond to Americans who say, "Oh, that why are we involved in this? This isn't our problem. Let Russia do what they want"?
I've had this conversation quite often, more recently, just because of my thoughts on what happened in Venezuela, as everyone is aware of that. So what do I say to those people? It is okay to say America first. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but there's a balance, right? It's the same thing with, like, when it comes to Democratic Party and Republican Party. Like, there is a place for individual liberty and taking care of everyone at the same time. Like, there's a balance with that, right? So if this was, make America great again and America first, but it didn't infringe on the rights and the territories of our allies, people who have shown up for us, okay. You know what I mean? If you want to say that and you don't want to hurt anyone else, great. I have no problem with that. But when it comes to putting people in a corner and trashing them and insulting them and giving them the middle finger, that I don't think that personally has a place in politics. Politics are supposed to be professional, right? Democracy is forged on this idea where all of us come together and we share ideas, we share differences, we find a way forward. If it doesn't work after a couple of years, because as you know, in politics, if you pass something, it's usually you're not going to know right away if it works. It takes time, right? We have forgotten somewhere along the line what politics really is, and these things take time, right? You're supposed to come together, work together. This is not someone or some people, unqualified people for that matter, that come in and say this, and they want it now, and it hurts everyone else. I don't think that has a place in America. It shouldn't, because that's not what our American values are based on. That's not what our Constitution is based on. But it's also not right for everyone else in the world, whether it's a first world country or third world country, right? So America first, okay, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of other people, the same way that we don't want it to infringe on our own rights.
I think a big strength of our foreign policy, especially over the past 80 years, is that we don't necessarily have the same imperial logic as Russia. We are out there ostensibly to assist democratic governments, to help liberalism and democracy spread through certain parts of the world. If there are people who want to have a democracy, we want to be there to help them. Like you said, the United States was founded in very much the same way. That they were fighting against an authoritarian regime where they did not have democratic representation. They fought back against certain abuses of power from a larger imperial country, and that story feels very familiar to me. And right now, that's the story of Ukraine. That's the story in a lot of places. And I think it would be a real shame for not just the United States, but the whole world if our foreign policy switched, very much as it looks like it is switching, to this imperial logic of how can we get the most resources for ourselves and for a handful of people who are in charge and are well connected to the current regime. That, reverting to that 19th century kind of great power imperial logic, that's not going to make America more wealthy. It's not going to make us well loved in other parts of the world. It's actually going to make us less safe. It's going to make us less wealthy. It's going to make the entire world a less safe place for the next generation. I think that's what I really want people to understand is that this system of alliances that we've built up through very, very hard work over the past 80 years since World War II, that is really critical to our safety and our prosperity. And it's easy for us to take it for granted today, but we're going to miss it when it's gone.
Yeah, exactly. And I always think back to what is the most simple way to think about when something happens, how it actually impacts you. And it's usually people's pockets, right? So even if you don't care about policy elsewhere in other countries, even if you don't care about Africa or South America, you just don't care about anyone else, whatever. Ultimately, some of the moves that we're making now are going to affect your pockets. Say we do invade Greenland, right? Think about how much of the U.S. money is tied up throughout other nations. Other nations sell our bonds, everything else, our economy will crash. Your dollar gets hurt. So it is in people's best interest to critically think about some of these things going on and try to understand. And if they can't understand, that's where they reach out to us. We talk to them and let them know in a positive conversation why this is not in their best interest, because it will hit your pocket because of X, Y, and Z. We need to be able to have those conversations, and people need to be able to listen to that, because ultimately, I think we all want the same thing. It's just easy if you don't know, or you haven't been taught, or you weren't exposed to that, to think these people have my interests at heart. But math doesn't lie. Threats from other countries, if we do this, doesn't lie. And I don't want that for anyone. No matter how dumb or smart they are in the US, everyone's going to get hurt from some of the things we're doing in the future. And most of that is going to come to your pockets.
Yeah.
So, really, that's the number one thing I think about is the pockets.
Absolutely. Just because we take over Greenland and get their lithium deposits, maybe that benefits a small handful of people that are high up in the Trump administration, including Donald Trump himself. But it's going to hurt everybody else because, as you say, our economy is so integrated with the European economy and with other NATO countries. And so much of it depends on the free movement of goods around the world that is facilitated by the NATO alliance and our power projection capabilities and so on and so on. And so people aren't thinking about the second order effects there. Donald Trump is just thinking about his own pocket there.
Yep.
I think that is probably the most important thing to understand about this whole thing. I would also point out that if you look at the average Russian pensioner who supported Vladimir Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014 and now the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russia is a relatively small economy compared to the United States. I think their entire GDP is less than Italy's. They spend about $1 billion a day on their invasion of Ukraine. Not to mention, last month, I think that they suffered a little over 1,000 KIA per day in Ukraine. So, in the long run, has that really benefited the Russian economy, taking out a huge portion of their working age male workforce, spending hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that they didn't really have in the first place, losing all of their business interests, people who had invested in Russia, all these companies that pulled out, having $300 billion of their assets in Europe seized, all the sanctions that have been put on them, all the equipment that they've lost. Was it worth it? I don't know.
Probably not. It also doesn't help that pretty much anyone that has served at some point in Russia, themselves or much of their family, is dead. At this point, the economy in Russia is slowly collapsing, but we're going to see a lot more of it this year specifically, especially with what happened in Venezuela, all the oil, black market oil that's come from Venezuela and some other things that were going on. Like that is a positive thing that's come from Venezuela, but that's also a timely thing. And I don't think it was really going to be worth the cost in regards to the US, not Russia. But Russia's going to be hurt. They just lost so many people. The soldiers used to get, I think it was 1 million rubles when they enlisted. I think this year it is now 200,000. But many of these people have now lost family members. The family has moved to other parts of Russia, or they're not in Russia anymore. They left. So we hear all these things about Russia sounding strong, but it's apparently not a strong economy. And if you have heard, I don't know if the interviews for the people, some of the guys that they've captured, but if you talk to the people that were captured, the Russian POWs or anything like that, wherever they're from, it's not great in Russia right now either. They're just numbers on a counter when they go over. Because, like I said, when I was over last time, it is a war of attrition. And the Ukrainians are very good with drones and they're very good with their dug-in positions. So sometimes they just send 6 Russians at a time to try to breach a post. They get eliminated. They send another 6. So is the death worth it for them? No. Is what the losses for them worth it? No. But they're going to keep doing it because I don't think Putin really cares. I think he's a bit of a psycho. And I worry about other authoritarian leaders in the world doing things like that potentially in the future.
It's very much, the Russian army has very much functioned this way for a very long time. It actually makes me think back to how part of my family ended up in the United States. In 1905, Russia started an aggressive war with a smaller neighbor that they thought was weaker. At the time, this was Japan. They managed to lose the war. And after they lost the war, there was an enormous social and economic, economic consequences within Russia. And that was part of the reason that my family left. My great uncle ducked the border fence to escape conscription into the Russian army after that 1905 war. So it's amazing how some of this history repeats itself.
Yep. I'm thoroughly convinced at this point, the short 38 years I've been on this earth, that we do not learn our lessons, and we're just doomed to continue doing the same things. Unfortunately, I don't see, history's kind of proven that at this point.
It is so frustrating. The other side of my family, they didn't make it out of, they were also Eastern European Jews. They didn't make it out of Europe until after World War II. Whoever wasn't murdered in the Holocaust, lived through the refugee camp for a few years, managed to make it to the United States. That's who ended up in the US. And it's just so galling to me to see another full-scale war in Europe, pretty much on the same patch of Black Earth in Eastern Ukraine that's been fought over so many times in the 20th century. And to see that this system of alliances that we built up after World War II start to implode, it's incredibly frustrating to see how little we've learned. Last thing I wanted to ask you is, you were a soldier on the ground in Iraq, in Afghanistan. How did those conflicts compare to what's going on in Ukraine in terms of scale, in terms of the operations that are going on? It feels like warfare has very much changed. On the one hand, the fight in Ukraine is a lot less mobile. There are many more entrenched positions. It's sort of, to outside observers, it sort of resembles a World War I style trench warfare. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you've seen.
Yeah, so I don't speak for all my fellow veterans in Iraq and Afghanistan, but so for me, both of my deployments to Iraq and to Afghanistan, they were very much on the ground. There was a lot of there's a lot of downtime. It was very much a reactionary war. Pretty much both wars I was in, it was a lot of, we trained together, we got over there, and we knew how to react when it was time. And typically, the attacks were not, frontline rushes. We weren't dug in trenches. We had bases that were built probably within a day. We had contractors coming to some of those bases. They held the post if we didn't have the Afghan nationals or Iraqi nationals or us on the post. And we would just kind of do missions throughout the day, doing certain things. Our enemy wasn't uniformed most of the time, unless you talk about like a Taliban in his black robes. But even then, a lot of the people that we fought were not in black robes. They were just, my opinion is, a lot of people I personally fought in Marja and Sangin and stuff like that were not even Taliban. It was just people that were mad because of, unfortunately, some of the things that we did that I look back on now and I'm kind of ashamed of. I'm not happy about some of the things that we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, but to an extent, I understand it. This is very different. When I came over last year, I thought, because of my experience, I'm just being honest with you, I don't speak for everyone, it's different. But my opinion is, I thought coming over here, the experiences that I had in Iraq and Afghanistan, I would be able to function the way that I did before, because I was a very good Marine. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if it's because of the way my dad, my mom taught me or whatever, but I ended up being really good. Hence why I got promoted so fast and everything else, got the words I did. But when it came to being on the ground here, it is very much World War One. With this added, this drone technology, man, is crazy. Because even if you, so if you don't know, and people at home don't know, this war is very much just a trench warfare front line. Unlike our traditional force in the US, where we have a whole logistics supply line and we have, people out doing this, Ukraine soldiers, there's so few of them that most of the front line is just Ukraine soldiers. Most of the logistics is contractors, volunteers, aid groups, all that. And that's most of what I did the last time I was here, when I wasn't with the Red Cross, helping the Red Cross with humanitarian efforts and everything else. So there are guys here now on the front line that had been there. When I was here last time, there was a guy that had been on the front line the entire time and only been home the entire time for 6 weeks. I don't know what happened to him. He doesn't respond to me anymore. I don't know if he's alive. He hasn't, I don't know. But that is what this war is now. It's uniformed soldier versus uniformed soldier, trenches and rushes, very much World War One. Just like I said, this added drone thing, because you also can't, Ukraine does well holding its territory, but whoever goes on the offensive risks drones, and the drones here are real. The drones, like I tell this in another podcast I did, the drones that Ukrainians have made actually have like machine guns on them now. We have drones that now can't be hacked because they fly with fiber optic cables attached to them. Last time I was here too, one of the things that I was doing was, my building was facing the direction they come from Russia. So some of the drones are loud. If I heard drones flying towards my building, I would call and report them. Soldiers on the ground would try to intercept them with machine gun fire, rifle fire, or some sort of other interceptor drone or something like that. So it is very much World War One, where that's happening, but a lot of what's going on is actually just drone warfare. There's drones up all the time. They're seeing movements and they're reacting to those movements based on kamikaze drones or artillery or shelling. We have, Russia still flying the few jets that they have, doing glide bombs in certain places. That happens everywhere. So it's very different than what it was Iraq and Afghanistan. Iraq and Afghanistan was very much reactionary. You're just walking, minding your business, and then you get sniped, and then you step on an IED. This one is very much, if you go on offense, you're going to see action. If you're on defense, action is going to come to you at some point. Yeah, I guess that's it. But uniform forces, non-uniform forces, it's very, very different. I don't think I was completely ready for that either. It was so jarring because getting ready for Iraq and Afghanistan, we trained together and we had this idea and we had certain things that we did to get ready for this. And then, the things I was doing in Ukraine, it was just so confronting where it's like, we're driving and a drone hits a truck and then the guy driving my truck just stops to smoke a cigarette. I'm like, well, there's drones around, and I step out of the truck and there's Russian bodies on the side of the road that the Russians haven't been able to pick up, covered in blankets with snow on them. And I'm just like, what is this? So it's very different.
Wow. Yeah.
But that is what most of the front line is.
It feels like that United States military forces actually would have quite a lot to learn from the Ukrainians about all the advances in drone warfare that have happened we're almost 4 years into this. I think of all the very high priced research that we do in our part of Maryland at Pax River, at
Yep.
Indian Head, all the billions and billions of dollars that go into that sort of research. And at the same time, the Ukrainians have had to innovate on a very large scale with a very small budget, to use drone technology as a force multiplier because their manpower is so stretched and they're taking on a much, much larger military in a much, much larger country. It really is incredible what they've been able to achieve. I know
It really is. And when you see what they are willing to do to keep their family safe, willing to sleep in a hole for a year, willing to freeze for a year, willing to not have electricity, and their water freezing every night. Yeah, it's amazing. It humbles you.
Yeah, it's incredible that Kharkiv is still there and still a functioning city that's been 20 kilometers from the Russian border this whole time. It's been under attack pretty much the entire war, and
It really has. We get shellings every day. We have power outages every day. And it is colder this year than it was last year. It is below zero at points of the day or at points of the night this time. And yeah, it can be rough here. And the people here, they make do. This is their home. Their families were here. A lot of the people east and south ended up coming to Kharkiv. So we had people from Mariupol, the east side of Kupiansk. So this is their new home now. Pretty much everyone in Kupiansk got evacuated here.
Right.
So, I mean, people are trying to make this work. And I will say this is one thing I am proud of the U.S. is I know people hear about all this money going to Ukraine, and it's not that simple. Ukraine has not gotten $350 billion. Let me make that clear now.
No.
That number that got thrown out is very wrong. It's a little less than half of that, but it's also not money. It is old ordnance and other weaponry that was going to kind of sit on the shelf for the U.S. anyway. We're giving it to them. It's costing a certain monetary value, so we say it's money. It's really not. And what that is doing is that it's stimulating our defense industry to make new weaponry. So it's actually in a lot of ways good for us. But a lot of the money that is coming here through USAID and other entities, it is to keep these places functioning. So for example, USAID here, some of that money goes to fixing the power plants, paying the people that are fixing the power plants, keeping the city functioning, keeping electricity up, keeping the Wi-Fi up. If it wasn't for the things that the US and the EU have done to complement this place, Kharkiv would be empty. People wouldn't live here. It would fall. And that would just be another big stepping stone for Russia, because specifically Kharkiv and Kupiansk are big stepping stones, specifically because of the rail line that comes all the way south in Russia. I can't remember the name of the city. It runs up through Kupiansk and through Kharkiv back into Russia. If we lost this area, that would be a huge supply loss for us, supply line loss for us, a huge supply line gain for them. They could move weaponry close, which would put Kyiv and Lviv and a lot of other cities a lot more open to ICBMs. Because you heard the other day,
Yeah.
Ukraine had their second ICBM strike. That was the night I got to Lviv. That was the night it hit. Probably like 5 minutes after it happened, a friend of mine called me. And was like, "Hey, you want to go see it?" I was like, "Sure." So just imagine if those lines move, those ICBMs, it is open season for everything here. So, I am very appreciative for the things the U.S. has done to support the Ukrainians in this fight, to just allow people to have heat and light and have a job. So, yeah,
Like you say,
I'm proud of my
Kharkiv
country for that.
would probably be empty if it weren't for some of those aid efforts. And we've also
Yep.
seen how Russia has used conflicts, not just in Ukraine, but in Syria and in other places. Part of their long-term political strategy is to drive refugees into Europe, into other places, to cause different political problems. That is a huge part of their strategy to try to foment a certain political outcome that they want. And especially in Ukraine, that is a big part of their strategy. They would love to see Kharkiv emptied and a massive humanitarian crisis and millions of more refugees going into Europe.
Yep, and that's exactly what they did in Moldova with the Transnistria region. It's what they did
Yep.
in Georgia, as Azerbaijan, the part of Germany, parts of Poland, parts of Romania. But luckily, Moldova, Romania, a few other countries have had elections, and they have pushed that out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but that's what they're doing.
You mentioned elections in Romania and Moldova. A right-wing populist movement like MAGA in the United States, we're not the only country that has this. There is Confederacja in Poland. There is AfD in Germany. The elections in Moldova and Romania were very, very close. They nearly elected very right-wing figures. It feels like the fight is not necessarily geographic, where it's the West versus Russia. This fight is now occurring throughout a lot of different countries along a very different fault line between forces that want to stand up for liberal democracy and forces that fall into this. I believe it's what Timothy Snyder calls. He contrasts two different types of politics. It's basically this sort of grievance politics that you see coming from the Trump administration that says, we were wronged, everything was great, and then something happened and it all got screwed up, and now we need to make our country great again. And it's that same type of political philosophy that you see coming out of Russia and trying to be imported into some of these Western countries, including the United States. And it feels like that's what this fight is ultimately all about.
Yep, I agree with you, man. We just need to be smarter. People need to be smarter. It's really easy to get comfortable and set in your ways and not want to think about things going on.
Yeah.
Some people need to sit back and really kind of consider a lot of these things that are happening and be like, how will it ultimately affect me if this happens, this happens, this happens? And typically it's not good. No matter how far it goes back or how long it takes, when we lose our tax base from, I understand some of the issue with the immigration, but immigration, like in the United States, is a big topic, but we also forget what immigration adds to the U.S. We have a huge tax base from them. So if, we continue cracking down the way that we are, it's going to make prices go up too. Everything is going to affect you in some points. So you got to just, again, it's two-party system I hate it, but we got to come together and start talking about these things and really start critically thinking about what this means, have a long-term plan, and do something for it. Like immigration, before Donald Trump got elected, we had a bipartisan deal. It would have addressed a number of immigration issues.
That bill was written by James Langford, one of the most conservative members of the Senate, and they still tanked it just to keep immigration as an issue in the election. And we
need to do better than that, because Democrats haven't done well in the past with that. Republicans haven't done well in the past with that. But I will say some of the more liberal Democratic politics want to address that in a meaningful way. And I think some other entities don't want to address it because they can use it just as something to run on. But it is
Exactly.
costing everyone in the U.S. money in their pockets.
Yeah,
People are
absolutely.
not
Well,
going to be able to afford things. So we just got to think about this, get outside of the two-party politics and actually start figuring out a way for it. And we can do that. It's not hard because we all want the same thing. We just need to shut up and talk about it and find words that mix together and move forward with something. But what we're doing now just isn't working.
I'll let you go enjoy the few hours of electricity that you have there in Kharkiv. But last thing I wanted to ask you, we've been talking a lot about these foreign policy issues that ultimately do come back to people's pockets. These decisions
Yes.
that we make about these other countries, ultimately that does have a real impact on our quality of life as Americans. And a lot of people don't necessarily realize all the long-term consequences that conflicts like Ukraine will have for us way down the line. But I wanted to ask, assuming you do get elected to county council, assuming you win your race for commissioner in District 4, you won't be dealing necessarily with a lot of foreign policy issues. How will your experience in Ukraine and your familiarity with this conflict, what lessons can you draw, if any, that will help you in more local politics?
Yeah. So, I was trying to think this a while ago. How do I put this in the words? If I was willing to serve my country and almost die in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm willing to go to Ukraine in the name of democracy, something that we care about a lot in the U.S., what do you think I'm willing to do for the 116,000 people in St. Mary's County? A lot. So these things, it just gives you a vision, right? Think outside the box. I think there's plenty of thinking outside the box we can do in regards to what I want to do in St. Mary's County. You have a much bigger job. You can affect a lot more things. Me, it's local. And you know what? I'm fine with that. One day maybe I want to do more politics. But right now I want to focus on county because there are a number of different things that I can do. It doesn't have to be all about addressing taxes to address the pockets. It's not about addressing your house when it comes to workforce housing, because affordable housing is like a social issue. Workforce housing is another issue. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
there's some things that I think that I can definitely offer, and visions I can offer, and ideas that I can offer. I'm not just in that system, because I feel like in St. Mary's County right now there's a system in place, and there's just enough being done along these specific lines to just kind of make it. And I'm willing to kind of break that and ask some hard questions and make some hard decisions. But ultimately, what I want is nothing matters to people's pockets if I can't keep them in St. Mary's County, right?
Yeah.
A new hospital, a new library, a new sheriff support services building, fixing traffic, fixing affordability in Maryland, addressing taxes. None of that's going to matter if I can't keep people in St. Mary's County.
Yeah.
So my whole point is, what can I do to keep people in St. Mary's County now to where they want to take advantage of those things? I think that thought process right there and figuring out what that means to people, that matters more than just, some of the things other people in St. Mary's County politics have said. And,
Gotcha.
honestly, too, the whole bottom line of why I'm running in the first place is I actually kind of do care. Like, I'm not saying that other people don't care, but like in regards to who I'm running against and everything, like I was born in Maryland. My family, my friends, I've been there most of my life at this point. That is the place I plan to be for a while. That is the place where my mom and dad are going to retire. My friends, I'm going to hang with my friends the rest of my life there. My dog lives there. Like if I'm going to live there and do something for that, I'm going to do my damnedest to make it good for everyone that I know. Cause I would feel absolutely terrible if I don't do my best to work at it while I'm there. So that way, when I leave that one day, I can say I did a pretty damn good job. And the other thing is too, I run my own schedule. County commissioner technically is a part-time job, but in reality, as we know, it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And that's something else I offer too. Like, I care. I'm going to make it a full-time job. I want to run around and understand things better. And that's what I've been doing a lot lately. So yeah, just a lot of vision, a lot of different ideas to address things. I think there are a lot of things being left on the table that we can talk about that will affect St. Mary's County rather than focus on the same typical issues.
Gotcha. All right, Ryan, I really appreciate you joining me. Stay safe over there. I'm sure I'll see you when you're back in Maryland.
Awesome, Harry. Thanks for your time again, man. I do appreciate you. You stay safe too, and I'll see you when I get back.